Jeff, and I'm going to be doing this thought question discussing corporal punishment. So, my key thoughts on the idea of corporal punishment happen to do with a strange dichotomy on that the effects of corporal punishment are really dependent on how the child receives punishment and whether or not the child is either to A, come with a positive takeaway or a negative takeaway. So, in the short term, corporal punishment fosters greater obedience than other forms of punishment due to the innate human desire to avoid pain. Thus, inflicting pain on someone for an action will have a greater effect of keeping that person from committing that action or doing that thing again rather than compared to when you are not inflicted physical pain. Well, that being without the outlier of people who are masochists, people who derive pleasure from pain, but those are typically outliers. However, while it fosters greater obedience, it also creates greater resentment in the short term. The child tends to have fear and uh, resentment of the authority figure of their parents due to them inflicting pain on them. So any positive benefit of corporal punishment tends to be derived in long term, and whether or not the child can come to a long term understanding that the corporal punishment was done for their benefit. If they are incapable of coming to that realization, or the corporal punishment was never like communicated properly to the child, or the child is never able to like come to this understanding that the corporal punishment was done for their benefit, then corporal punishment is horrible. Corporal punishment is not only ineffective at fostering uh, good people, it also creates a situation where the child does not have a good relationship with their parents. That tends to create falling outs as the child develops and becomes a teenager or a young adult or even an old adult, where that person is no longer to have a good relationship with their parents, and that tends to result in dissociative behaviors, prone to greater violence due to violence, greater anger, more antisocial behavior, and just rampant negative consequences because of the inability for the parent or authority figure to properly instill or communicate to the receiver of corporal punishment the express reasoning for the punishment. And the reason why they decide to go with this form of punishment is to prevent that person from doing something and keep them safe, because you want them to be safe, you want them to be well off, you want them to have a good life, you're doing it for their benefit. If you are able to instill that into them, then corporal punishment is fairly effective. However, due to the negative implications it had in the short term, it's very easy to not be able to have a good relationship with your parents if you are subjected to corporal punishment due to the time it would take for even those who are able to make the long term realization of why they were able to make the long term realization of why they were subjected to the punishment because of how many years it took them and they suffered and didn't properly understand. So, corporal punishment is essentially when it's executed well, it works. When it's executed poorly, it doesn't work. So, those are the real pros and cons. Corporal punishment is not really about whether or not it's justified, it's whether or not it's executed properly. However, for me personally, as someone who's been subjected to corporal punishment and has had this whole process play out, I am really apprehensive to administer the corporal punishment due to the fact that I'm unwilling to risk the fact that if they are incapable of understanding the reasoning behind the punishment it defeats the entire purpose of punishing them and only increases deviancy and fosters resentment. So that's not good, and that's not the best way to do that sort of thing. Let's see. So, like, what ages would it be appropriate? Uh, I believe it's more of depending on the scale of punishment. For example, you shouldn't be spanking babies, like newborns under a year or 2 years old, I'm guessing. But like it also should scale if it's like a 1 year old, 1.5 year old, a tap on the wrist sort of thing. That might be an acceptable form of corporal punishment. But like you shouldn't smack a child who's like 1 or 2 right across the face. That'd be uh, way too extreme, even for someone who was like someone more accepting of the idea of corporal punishment. That's way too much. You can't like be slapping kids that are like 1 or 2 years old. But like a tap on the face, maybe maybe a light spanking. Uh, but the real question should be when is it inappropriate? When should you stop spanking children? And I feel you should stop spanking children when children develop the ability to reason. Like once you know your child is able to diagnose and analyze properly, not like at an adult level, but like have proper analytical skills to reason and be able to question and explain the course of action and be able to question whether or not something is right or wrong, then I think it's time to stop spanking them. Because at that point, it's probably better to simply try to explain the reasoning of why what they did was inappropriate rather than just spank them for doing it. Because it's not worthwhile to tell your child not to do something and it decentivize them to not do it if they don't truly understand why they are not doing it. If you don't really explain to a child who is able to develop reasoning in the sense, I'm talking about usually it's around maybe 11, 12 years old, you're able to have like higher level analytical reasoning skills. Uh, if they don't understand why it's wrong to be disrespectful, then like just telling them to not be disrespectful is worthwhile because they're not capable of understanding or differentiating what is disrespectful, what is not disrespectful, without like corporal punishment telling him this specific instance was disrespectful, and they're not able to really properly analyze what was it that was disrespectful about their actions. And they also don't understand the actual value of don't be disrespectful other than my parents hit me when I did so, so therefore I don't do it because I would think my parents would want to hit me if I would do so. So that's pretty much all I feel about that subject. uh yeah, that's pretty much it.